Hello and welcome to another episode of Utilities Club. Today we're discussing the power of digital solutions to create sustainable and resilient urban water infrastructures. And we're joined by Cecilia Correia, Senior Water Solutions Manager at Bentley Systems. Welcome, Cecilia. Thank you for coming to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here today.
Thank you. It's really great to have you here in Dubai as well, in the studio with us. And as you said, the topic we're discussing today is really huge. There's so many parts to it, and we'll go into depth in a few minutes about it. But just kind of to give an overview and to start, how can the Middle East best take advantage of just new technologies as part of their decarbonization efforts?
One of the first things we need to have in mind is how the water industry actually impacts carbon emissions. And the only way for you to improve is actually understanding where it can affect. And from water intake, cleaning the water, distributing water, and treating the water, it requires a lot of energy. In terms of the way that we can improve, if we start by committing to some targets, then we are already on our way to actually try to achieve them. And I think the Middle East is already seen as a pioneer on those aspects, because one of to get started, you need water. And in the region, this region has adopted desalination as a way to find water to supply the cities. And desalination is something that gets very expensive in other regions. And the Middle East has been able to use a lot of technology, which is state-of-the-art, to become more, to decrease this carbonization and therefore use other energy renewable sources.
That's really interesting review. And you said just water is kind of the key to everything to life. So it's really important to make sure their supply is sustainable and efficient. And recently in the region, we've seen not only the impact of obviously the sun and the dry temperatures, but also very heavy rains. So how can innovative digital solutions help address this problem?
Well, the heavy rain events extreme events will become even more common in the next years. Yeah. And not only in this region, but everywhere. Also in places where they had seen before, we are seeing more and more this type of situations. We have to understand that the city infrastructure is usually designed for a 5-year return period rainfall event. Some cases they have 10. Some cases they even tested for 20 or 50. But no one can design and construct an infrastructure that will cope with 100-year return period of intensity. So I think what we can do is that we can be better prepared to deal with these extreme events. So I'm a very optimistic person, and when it comes to water, I think it's actually an opportunity for us to redesign our cities. What we have constructed and what we have designed in 100 years ago, 40 years ago, or even 20 years ago, it is changing. And so I think it is an opportunity for us to rethink. And so using digital solutions can help us. For example, it can help us organize our emergency response. How can we deal with these situations? We can test digitally before we actually construct. So at the planning stage, really do scenario analysis management, so that we can understand, maybe I can deviate some of that water. Maybe I can even reuse that water. If I can find a way to store it, maybe I can use it at a later stage for different other purpose, like irrigation, like cleaning streets, for example. There are so many things that we can do, and technology is there to actually support us taking these decisions in a more insightful way, to say so.
I really like that perspective, and just the idea of approaching the problem not as a challenge, as an opportunity, and obviously the importance of just preparing for change. Talking about Bentley Systems specifically, what are some of those innovations or specific solutions that can be implemented to account for stormwater variability?
The stormwater variability is like that in, I think, every region. Yes. In some countries where you actually had water all year along, they are facing scarcity issues because they haven't thought of storing water for longer periods, for example. And so I think it is very common that more and more people actually need to use the technology. One of the very important aspects is that Bentley is what we call the infrastructure software company. So we have solutions that cover from planning, but also designing, constructing, and operating. If we think about, how can we actually incorporate this in our cities, right, and the way that we are developing, it always starts with an idea that can we actually do this? And so for that, we have several planning solutions, whether we're talking about a network, a supply network, whether we're talking about sewage, whether we're talking about plant design so that we can treat it better. So we do have solutions that cover all the phases of the infrastructure. And so I think it's a matter of testing digitally so that we can construct better.
Wonderful. And so yeah, it's important to have all the parts of the process into account and just preparing for anything that would happen. And one of the debates that are happening in the region in relation to these challenges is the possibility of integrating stormwater into the urban water cycle, just to reuse and just to adapt to the changes. How can Bentley's innovations help turn this vision into a reality?
That's exactly what we like. We like to have visions, and our purpose is to really enable these ideas, these visions to become a reality. So not only in our heads, not only in paper, but also construct them. One of the things we can do is that we can mitigate the risk. And this is what is very important when it comes to ideas and discussions that we are having. They are so important to actually brainstorm and rethink. We commonly get stuck into ideas, into routines, and having the opportunity to rethink our cities, to rethink the way we manage water is very important for the future of our cities. And so the cities, they need to become more livable because people more and more engage with also who manages water, and people, they demand an answer, they demand a solution. So this is why it is so important that we incorporate in our solutions this type of interaction where you can actually test before you construct in order to take at least some decisions based on data that can support your decisions.
Great. I love that perspective of cities as organisms that are in constant change, and there's a big need, as you said, to prepare for change. Talking about specifically smart cities, the region is trying to digitalize its cities very quickly over here. There's some very big projects coming up. So why is it important to incorporate innovative solutions as part of the water ecosystem? What specific solutions can be implemented?
That's an interesting question. And just by starting with the smart, I usually like to change smart water cities to wise water cities. And why is this? Because smart is intelligent. Mm-hmm. And if I say that, I have this stream, it's dry all year, I don't need to, construct a culvert. That's an intelligent decision to take based on money. Like, I'm saving money, right? But is it wise? I don't think it is. A wise means that you have learned something with the past, with mistakes. So to take a smart decision by reducing costs constructing a certain culvert is not wise, because we know that that water will come eventually. And so I usually like to use the term wise water cities. And if we think smart cities is what we were talking before, putting people at the center and core of its development. And when we think, why should we construct smart cities? Why should we have a smart city? It's because I want to have better traffic. It's because I want to reduce my energy consumption, for example. I want to become more environmental. And so how can I be supported to actually construct this? I think there's one word that is key for smart, which is integration. As we said, a city will have to act as one, but they will have to connect so many systems with so many areas that they actually need to come together. And one is usually dependent on the other. If we fail in one, we will fail on all the others, as there's a big interrelation with them. So how can technology actually support this? It can support because today we have real-time data, for example. We have digital data. The world has become digital. And so by incorporating this information, we can actually, in real time, start taking decisions. And even if we're not doing in real time, we're actually gathering the information. We are learning with it. And we are a world powered by IoT, right? And today you hear AI everywhere. Even if it's not artificial intelligence, everyone is, yes, assuming that there is. So it is fundamental so that we can actually reduce, for example, if we think about non-revenue water, reducing non-revenue water. I mean, we need to be proactive. We need to detect an event before you have a huge water loss, a huge pipe burst, for example. If we think about asset management, don't we want to be informed when we need to act when a certain pump is not working properly, for example? And we can have that information in digital graphics, for example. We can act more proactively instead of being reactive. I think that is key. It's the integration and having people as a core. So technology will definitely support that part.
Wonderful. As you said, people are so important. Just integrating all the systems that make a city is so important. In water is like a big part of them. And in the region, also there's some really big and ambitious targets when it comes to sustainability, which is a topic we've been mentioning throughout, but I just wanted to stop in it for a second. Many of the cities like Dubai, city in Saudi Arabia, they want to be sustainable cities, energy efficient, and they also want to create a lot of green spaces, will require a lot of water. So how can digital solutions help drive these goals?
Interesting that you mentioned, because all those projects, if you think a little bit, they're putting people at its core. Like, you want people to be able to not have so much traffic. You want people to have livable cities, right? Greener, nicer, with better environment, and reduce, of course, all our impact in the environment. And going back, to what we were talking about, technology. First thing is, when we think about cities, we think about number one thing that needs to support, which is water. You need water to supply people. And the second one is where to get that water. So it's already starts with understanding, do I have enough water? We were talking about desalination, because you needed to have a certain amount of water to actually support the growing of these cities. Then you need to treat the water itself. And so technology comes again to reduce the cost of treatment, to improve the treatment, but also to decrease the way that we were doing things, which had a very high carbon footprint. So just by taking water to the city, technology is already playing such an important role. And then when it comes to distributing water, to clean the water and distribute it to people, you're thinking about high quality service, because you don't want to open your tap and not having enough water, or that the water doesn't have enough quality for you to drink or even to use in your daily work, for example. And already there, you are already thinking, I need to reduce non-revenue water. I cannot allow that my pipes are breaking all the time. I need to detect early births at a certain time. So technology, again, is playing such an important role when it comes to avoid that we have problems in our system. But also when we go and treat wastewater treatment plants a couple of years ago, they were seen as a huge carbon emission. Our footprint was super high. The water carbon footprint is high. Water management is high. But we are also seeing that we can actually lead in decreasing this carbon footprint, because there are so many other ways of doing things. And for example, wastewater treatment plants, they were consuming a lot of energy. And today, in some countries, they are even called resource recovery plants, because they were actually, by improving the process of doing the wastewater treatment, they were increasing the efficiency of the process, and with that they were increasing the production of biogas. So they could actually produce as much energy as they needed to consume.
Wow.
And in other cases, they could even become positive. So this type of shift came from the need. Again, challenges becoming opportunities. And we wouldn't be able to do that without the technology to support us. Am I actually being efficient enough? Can I actually improve my aeration? Can I actually reduce the quantity of aeration? Will I still be able to have my treatment, my process in place to guarantee that I comply with regulations, with the standards, and also with the quality that I need to deliver? The other aspect is water reuse, for example. I mean, before, that was something unthinkable, right? You use the water, you discharge into the rivers. But it was because of the need that we actually had to, again, put technology working. And reverse osmosis, for example, is a process that was consuming a lot of energy. And actually, that's another area where the Middle East has been leading and is seen by all the world as the pioneers and leading the way in technology that is really advancing the way that they're doing reverse osmosis, for example.
That's so interesting. I love those examples of turning challenges into opportunities, and technology has been able already to make such a huge impact in the sector and therefore improve people's access to water and the quality of water that they drink. Looking forward to the next 3 to 5 years, where do you see the sector going?
So I was just recently at a SWAN conference in Vancouver in May, and one of the things that we discuss is, water management, is how we see, we all know that water is essential. So, and I actually love to work in an area, in an industry where, we're not at risk, right? I mean, water may be at risk.
The industry is reaching literally every person on Earth.
Exactly. But the fact that we're seeing more extreme events, extreme floods, there's more scarcity in many places because we haven't been using it in a sustainable way in many places. But there's less availability also. And so when we think, where will the sector be in 3 to 5 years, I think we're going to be in a good place, because we are now, reuse of water, that is something that a couple of years ago, no one would actually support that. It was like, no way, I'm not going to drink water, or I'm not going to use water. And today you're thinking, okay, it can be used for irrigation. I think there's an important aspect that we should never forget, that there is only one water. There is not the water that we drink, the water that we discharge. The water is a cycle. So the water that we intake, the water that we drink in our houses, the water that we discharge, or our sewage, it goes back to nature. It comes back to us. So there is only one water, and this one water approach means that we should not be spending. Losing water, for example, because we need that water, right? Also, if we're losing water, we are spending more energy, more chemicals, more time, and also people time to maintain, to operate that water system that basically goes nowhere, right? Because we're losing it. And that is a very important resource. So we will be taking much more care of the water that we take, also the water that we treat, and the water that it comes back to us. There will be a bigger relation, a more interactive relation between us and the water and the environment. So the example that you gave before, when we look at people as a center of the development, it's exactly what we our thinking. It's exactly the way we look at it. And today we all have our phones in our houses. Houses are becoming smarter, right? Yeah. Like the light. If I go to a certain place, it would shut down automatically if you don't go. To save energy, to save time, to give a better experience. That's the same with the cities that I see for the future. We also have, like, if you think about the aging workforce in utilities in cities, and they will be replaced by young they are digital natives. Yes. They expect to have insights. They expect that data can actually, provide us with more efficient workflows, for example. And so I see that in the next 2-3 years, there will be a better relation between environment, water, cities. So we will incorporate water in our cities. Instead of getting rid of it, we will just assume, okay, we will have heavy rains, so we need to incorporate in our cities. We will increase our green infrastructure because we will say, okay, so trees and green infrastructure is important to create a better environment. It can also deal with rain on a normal basis. It can deal with a little bit of that rain when we have extreme rainfalls. It can reduce the time of concentration. It can reduce the risk, for example. And so the technology will be there because we are all connected. As I said, people will become more aware. They are today already much more aware than they were before. Because of environmental aspects, because of hearing, net zero, because of hearing a lot of these terms that become very trendy and popular. So I think people will also play a very important role in this aspect. They will report situations that are happening, for example, before utilities or municipalities have the opportunity to look at it. So I think water reuse will be on top of the agenda, I guess, and also the green infrastructure.
Wonderful. I think it's an amazing place to end because, like you said, we need to take care of the water that we have, and technology will play such an important role in fostering that relationship with cities and water and building those wise cities that you were talking about. So thank you so much for coming to the podcast. It's been great to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for listening to the podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes of Utilities Club.